I think AI has made us very power conscious, hasn't it?
Yes. Or
Every
power conscious.
search, every whatever now is
Not
calculated.
only power conscious, in terms of computer power, but
Yeah.
power in the sense that we're starting to dumb people down unless we're careful, if that's possible.
Yeah.
I've got a story about that, but if this is being recorded, I shall keep quiet.
Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Simon. I am cloud therapist. This is Cloud State of Play, the April 2025 episode. So, second quarter of 2025. I continue to be somewhat bewildered by the passage of time. How quickly we're getting to where are we now? Almost summer. And I also wonder what the rest of the year is going to be holding for us as well in the IT world. So that's going to be really interesting. But that's really kind of, I guess, the beauty of wondering about it all and seeing what's going to happen. Talking of beautiful things, I have the resilient Paul Bevan back on for another episode with me. Paul is the Director of Infrastructure Research at Bloor Research. Yeah, welcome to this episode, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. As you say, resilient, keeping going, just motoring on. It takes a lot to stop me.
Indeed. So spring is here, as we said. Summer's
Yeah,
almost on us as well, just
yeah,
around the corner.
yeah.
And we have, again, three more topics for you, as we always do, in Class Data Play. So our topics for this episode are, one, the future of AI is quantum computing, apparently, and edge AI as well. So, yeah. So future of AI is quantum computing. It's an article somebody's written, and we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. I'm just looking at my notes because it says really with three question marks on it. We'll come back to that. Second topic, beyond hardware. So leading the shift to a solution-driven future by HP Inc. And I emphasize the Inc. because we'll know what I mean a little bit later on. And the third one is OpenStack gets rescued by the Linux Foundation. Another favorite topic. Okay, so Paul, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Fantastic. So let's look at our first topic. The future of AI is quantum computing. Now, this is by, there was a post that we saw, I noticed, by a company called Paper Plus Media Limited. And there was a conversation that somebody had about it. And then that led on to there was comments on that post. It was a repost, right, that we noticed.
Yeah.
And then that led on to the main article that was actually talking about this subject.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, it was the same person reposting the article who'd written the article.
Who'd written the article. Okay. Yeah. So a Rostislav Pavlicek, I think, or Pavelek. Yeah. Sorry, I'm probably butchering the name there, so apologies for that. But yeah, so this is kind of going into some details about sort of AI and how its future is kind of based on quantum computing, unparalleled processing for power for AI, and then talks about edge AI as well, faster real-time decision making thanks to quantum computing. So it's presumably he's talking about kind of your normal Gen AI stuff as well as edge AI, both benefiting from quantum computing.
Well, I don't think the way I read the article was that actually then it ended up being two almost separate articles in that, yeah, quantum could be used for, language model training, and particularly some of the heavy sort of duty lifting that's needed in early stages of model training, and quantum potentially. And again, my argument is we don't know enough about how quantum's going to perform at this stage to,
Mm.
in theory, it ought to be really good at language, large language model training, in theory, but I'm not a quantum expert, so I don't, but the second part of the article about edge AI ended up being nothing to do with quantum as far as I could see. I mean, there's no sort of link to it. It was really just about how, you know, as you say, large language models or the results of large language models, because you can't put a large language model really right out to the edge. You start talking about autonomous vehicles,
Mm.
there's a limit to how much processing power you can put in in a car.
Mm.
It's that. So there was not really a link between quantum computing and edge AI. He just sort of flipped into edge AI as a sort of, the way forward is large
Yeah.
language models. And you go, well, yeah, small language models on a gateway level, yes, but right out at the far end edge device, don't know.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I mean, sure. I don't think there's an argument in regards to, as and when quantum computing becomes viable, because it's still at the experimentation stage, and there's lots of problems still with the actual technology and the architecture itself. And yeah, sure. I mean, there has been some, breakthroughs recently. Microsoft's Majorana, I think, chip design and so on. That's kind of overcome some of the the noise problems and stability problems that quantum computing experiences. And by the way, guys, if you actually want to get a little bit more of an introduction to quantum computing, my dear friend Saim Safdar, who runs the Cloud Native FM YouTube channel, has done an interview with somebody at T-Systems. So I will drop the link in the description for you to have a look at that interview with one of my colleagues actually at T-Systems. So I just set it up and they kind of went at it in terms of the conversation and the detail, but really good intro to quantum computing. So if you're interested in the details of that, have a look at the link in the description of this video. But yeah, so obviously, as we said, it's Microsoft sort of Majorana announcements recently, just earlier this year, actually, not too long ago, where seemed to be a breakthrough. But we're still a long way away from that, right, Paul? In terms of
Yeah, we are, and even that marjoram, announcement earlier in the year has elicited quite a strong response from the scientific community. The people who are actually in the guts of quantum, mostly along the lines of, it could be good, but there's they haven't really provided peer-reviewed evidence yet that this is going to work. And I think that's part of the challenge, and it was part of my concern about the article generally, is you start making these claims for quantum at this stage, it's difficult. We don't know. You're right. There are still some issues. And they're starting to be able to deliver quantum results, but not at the sort of scale that it's going to make it significantly different than classical computers. And that's the issue. They've got to scale it without the error problems that they've got. And you're right. They're making, and I expect that they will ultimately fix that. But is it, when you ask people and you read around the subject, it's anywhere from, well, it could be ready for the live, for real time and go for it in 5 years or 10 years, and people start to sort of spread that out.
Yeah.
And it's always a challenge. So, my issue is not, is quantum going to enhance, AI training? Yeah, probably. But we don't know. And I think to do an article like this at this stage just feeds the hype.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, no matter how you kick and scream about quantum computing and, it's a different paradigm and so on, the ultimate achievement that quantum computing has is speed. It's ability to do things that we do right now, but faster. It's not like it's giving you, it's not like the sort of a breakthrough in terms of something new that it's going to do, something that we don't do right now, or it's applied to something that we do not do right now. And we just, are just conventional computers just don't touch that, whatever that thing is, right now. It's essentially, no matter what you do at the end of the day, it just makes things go faster. Because if you're to set a supercluster or a mainframe onto the same challenge right now, it will achieve the same thing. It'll just take it hundreds, thousands of years or whatever to achieve that, but it will still achieve it. So I think quantum, when you compare it like that, all that quantum computing is doing is actually bringing in, a faster processing capability.
But there seems to be a flip side to that as well that I've read about. And this is still, I think, conjecture to an extent, but you're reading more and more people talking about this, is that there are certain things that quantum will be really good for, and obviously the sort of, the poster child is break it, the cryptography.
Cryptography,
is the sort of poster child, but there'll be all those sorts of areas. But there seems to be a sort of body of opinion that says they won't replace classic computers completely. There'll be things that CPUs do better that quantum will never do better, or certainly more cost effectively, where you don't need. So I think there's a view that said, and God, I can't believe I'm going to use the word hybrid, but there's going to be a hybrid world out there, given our arguments around hybrid cloud. It's going to be a mix. It's just way too early to be saying what quantum is going to be doing beyond some of those, you say, those poster child type applications where you absolutely get it. But in theory, model training, absolutely.
So just coming back to the article a little bit. So it just says kind of quantum computing and edge AI and parallel processing, blah blah blah. Faster real-time decision-making and so on. That's fine. Together they promise to revolutionize industries, healthcare, finance, encryption, so on. That's fine. I agree with that. Quantum computing is the kind of the AI supercharger. But that's what, 5-10 years away, kind of thing. I don't know. It's not kind of something that we can do tomorrow. So I wouldn't really look at it, as I wouldn't be talking about it in that way right now. I'd kind of want to maybe speculate a little bit and maybe just kind of, stick to the things like faster and real-time decision making and not actually say, it's going to like supercharge everything. It will, but it's 5-10 years, away from kind of where we are. Is it going to make things like model training faster? Of course it will, because as we said, anything that takes a long time right now, quantum computing can accelerate that, because as I said earlier, ultimately, no matter how you kick and scream, that's all that QC is doing. It's just achieving things much faster. All those sort of calculations or drug research or whatever it is that it's got, that we take a long time to do today, is just going to make it a lot faster, with QC.
To an extent, you can almost see a parallel going back in history between CPUs and GPUs. Right. They've each got their role. And quantum is definitely going to have a very significant role, I think. And it's probably going to unlock, and this is where you really get into the realms where, you want to go in, you don't want to go into at this stage, is things that we can't even think about at the moment that quantum will be able to handle. And so we're not going to go there. But
absolutely. So yes, I think, if you were to drop a rendering, the rendering of a scene on a CPU today and ask it to render that at 4K 60 frames a second, like a Call of Duty video game frame, right? Now, can a CPU do that? Well, yes, it can. It just will take ages to do, and it'll be absolutely useless today. But if you drop it to a GPU, it won't even break a sweat. It won't even blink, right? So this is essentially the same thing. Can conventional computers do something that the quantum computers can do? Yes, they can, but it'll just take 1,000 years to achieve it, whereas a quantum computer will do it, in its sleep. So I think that's a given. I don't really see kind of an argument on that. I think it's the focus on, what is realistic today, where quantum is today, and then speculate a little bit about the future of kind of when we have much more stable, much more performant, much more scalable quantum computing systems that have a lot more qubits than the current ones do. I mean, the current ones just don't do anything really. They're just kind of experimental. They're not really able to achieve a great deal. So yeah, absolutely. I think that will be something that large language models and generally sort of talking about Gen AI would will benefit from, definitely. And we can train and knock out models a lot faster in the future. But as to when that's going to be possible and to what degree, I don't know. As we said, that's still years away, potentially 5 to 10 years away. It depends on how much investment there is in quantum computing and more breakthroughs happening, just like the Microsoft one from earlier this year. So game changer, yes. Quantum and AI and edge AI, sure. Quantum trained AI models, as we said, deployed on the edge. So the edge could be whatever you like, including vehicles, as we said, wearables, whatever else you want to do. I mean, I think for things like vehicles, maybe, but the wearables, I think you'll have to, that's probably about 15, 20 years away when we can get a quantum computer down to that size. If that's what he actually means by the way that the technology will go. So I don't know. I mean, it does list that kind of, as we said, autonomous vehicles, smart cities, healthcare we already know about. And obviously, I think maybe the more immediate threat and the more immediate application is security. It's the whole cybersecurity and encryption thing, where, and as we all know, quantum computing, if you apply it to existing security systems, it will unlock them very quickly. It will break all codes these days extremely quickly.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of work going on, from a sort of almost like counter-espionage. It's the how do you counter this going on? So I think that's focused people's minds about what they do about security in that era, in an era of quantum computing. So I think it's quite different, but it's a quite different topic to have than this one here. That's for sure.
Yeah, and the last line says these technologies will evolve. They will drive AI's next leap, forward shaping industries. So I think AI or Gen AI in general, when we're really kind of talking about Gen AI, because that's kind of where the revolution is, that has a lot more stuff to do right now. There's going to be a lot more enhancements, and it needs to mature a lot more than it does, than it is right now, before it can kind of even think about being dropped onto a quantum computer to do the same thing. So it itself, the technology, the architecture, and we've seen some over the last 18 months kind of vendors playing tricks with it, like OpenAI with kind of multimodal models and a mixture of experts and thinking models and having memory, and now kind of onto AI agents and things like that. So they are playing tricks with it to enhance. And I think we talked about how this is kind of the very similar to that sort of Intel TikTok technology, where something new comes out and then you enhance that for a couple of years and then you bring out the next thing. That's kind of beyond that sort of development approach. I'm seeing a very similar pattern in for Gen AI models as well.
Yeah, I think that's the natural progression of almost any product you look at. I think it's a natural progression that says, I've got something really good here. How can we, improve on that? And then, of course, you get to the point of diminishing returns on that particular, technology turn, and you need to come up with something new, or somebody comes in from left field with a completely new approach, and again, it changes everything. And then, but you go through the same cycle again and again. So I think you're right. I think that's exactly where we are. I mean, and I'm still, I suppose, confused is probably the right term about, when we talk about AI, between the difference between what we're now calling Gen AI, and the algorithm based, the very much the sort of machine learning type approaches based on algorithms that are decades, almost centuries old.
Yeah,
And those to an extent don't change, and actually quantum could probably run those a darn sight faster than they're run today.
definitely. Yeah.
But this whole idea, I mean, the whole idea of generative AI, I mean, you talk about, I was reading an interesting, well, it was actually it wasn't an interesting article in a sense, it was a series of statistics about the crashes of autonomous vehicles in the States.
Right.
I'll dig out the link for you so you can sort of see it.
Yeah.
That says, AI's, at the edge has got a long way to go
Yeah.
before we trust it completely. So, generative AI to me scares the living daylights out of me because we're seeing so far that it does hallucinate, and the stats show that it's sort of 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 responses are hallucinations. You think,
Yeah.
my goodness me. So, and because we're trying to impose our own, we're not trying to impose our bias, but we're naturally imposing our own biases on the models, I think. Whereas algorithms, the sort of mathematical algorithms of for machine learning, less so. But I'm not saying they're completely bias free.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so I think you're right to your original point. I think there's a lot of development of AI for edge solutions that needs to be improved. We need to develop further and we talk about guardrails, but fundamentally, take the driving car scenario.
Yeah.
Human drivers get involved in an awful lot of accidents.
Yeah.
And some of those end up in deaths. So do AIs,
AIs, yeah.
And you think, okay. You can't take an AI. Well, you can take an AI to court for dangerous driving, but but it's those sort of issues that says, before you get too excited about it. But it was interesting. I was having an echocardiogram a couple of days ago, which I have once a year anyway, to sort of my MOT, and I was talking to the person doing, the technician, doing the echocardiogram. We were talking about AI, and he was saying, that for an echocardiogram, there's effectively a 3D picture of the way your heart's operating. AI's still got a long way to go. He says, I still have to do a lot of intervention on that. He says, but for a mammogram, for detecting breast cancer, he says, it'll pick up the issue weeks or months before a human eye can detect it.
Yeah,
absolutely. So again, we're at that sort of point with these sort of these sort of edge devices, and so it's just, I think, ensuring we don't get carried away with that AI is going to take over everything at the edge in the next year. It ain't.
Indeed. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. So the second topic is beyond hardware, leading the shift to a solution-driven future with HPE Inc. Now, I've emphasized the Inc., as we said, because this is kind of the more consumer side of HP as the company sort of split up years ago. So it's not the enterprise side, it's not the server side of it. But there is actually a twist at the end because we still have some stuff to mention about HP. There's another article as well. So it's kind of really two articles in one. You guys are getting a bargain today. You're getting two topics in one from us. So yeah. So Paul, this was I think it was held at so it's actually based on a video. So somebody posted that video and we kind of picked up on it. And there's an interview with a guy who's the division president for HP Digital Services, Faisal Masood. And the interview was between, I think, somebody from, Deloitte. Yeah, Deloitte was kind of one of the persons. And I think the other person's from actually from HP Inc.
No, the other
Um,
one was from Deloitte. Sorry, the other one's from Deloitte as well. There were two Deloitte people.
okay, right, that's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, two
But there was
Deloitte.
a no-show, right? Somebody did not turn up. There was a Hillary Horn, global lead consulting partner for HP Inc., which I think did not turn up, or somebody did not turn up anyway. So because there was four people on the speaker list, and the video
Brilliant.
only shows three people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what happened there, but somebody didn't turn up. Anyway, so this was at MWC Mobile World Congress 2025. I think back in Feb. They normally hold it in February, normally in, I think, in Spain, somewhere in Barcelona or something like that. That's where it was. So yeah, what did you make of the interview? I mean, let me give you like my sort of very quick summary, and we'll maybe kind of dive a little bit deeper. But he was kind of talking about um kind of, yeah, okay, so it's moving beyond hardware, but I I couldn't really understand what was the software solution that HP Inc. wanted to actually put into place. What were they actually developing? What's the actual tangible results of this? They kind of skirted around, onboarding capability I picked up on, configuration from the start or something like that, making customers' lives easier. They talked about agentic software. Okay. But I didn't really get how what is this translating into in terms of actual software? Because normally from this space, and Lenovo's been notorious at this, maybe even Dell to a degree. So any software that's added onto, like if you buy a notebook computer or a laptop computer, some people like to call it, any software that's beyond the basic operations of that machine from the vendor of the computer is normally perceived as bloatware. And the likes of Lenovo and the other sort of vendors really got a stick, probably about 10 years ago, when this whole kind of, we could add all of this bloatware into the machine and it can pick up all these metrics about the usage of the computer and send it back to us. So all the magazines, all the blogs and everything picked up on this and started really having a go at the vendors. I don't know if they've kind of curtailed any of that. These days, I don't really have any experience with it. But beyond that kind of functional requirements type of software that you need, with your systems, everything else is perceived by consumers as bloatware. So yeah, I don't know, what was your take on what was the intent by this guy, Faisal Masood? What was he talking about?
Well, it was the one I got picked out of it was wanting to try and give end users a common environment, a common look and feel, a common integrated approach to all the devices they use. So whether that's a phone or or as you say, a notebook,
Yeah.
or I think he even mentioned printers. You think, really? And so you've got this sort of, all right, what we want to do is integrate the experience for the end user. Well, to an extent, our experiences of this are fairly well integrated anyway. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at the way in which most of the applications we use as a consumer or end user, we've got past the point of, I've got it run it, I don't want to look at it on a mobile phone because they haven't rendered it properly for a mobile phone.
Mm.
Way beyond that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So it was odd. But what struck me, I mean, quite apart from the way in which the Deloitte interviewers were fawning over him, which I found slightly disturbing, was the fact that, and this will come out in the next piece as well, is that hardware-oriented companies, and I used to work for one for many, many years, really struggle with the concept of end user benefit.
Right.
They know about their products, they know how to make them better, they know about the features they've got, and again, the HP guy was running into the same problem. Is that what he was talking about were features that were going to include in the sort of HP range, and you think, yeah, fine, but you haven't in any way, shape, or form said, what does that mean in terms of real benefit? Yes, I've got these features, I'm doing that. And that, that was the thing that came out for me. And if you're Deloitte, actually you're delighted, because if they start understanding that, Deloitte won't have a job to do. And
Yeah.
because obviously what the big five have been about is actually converting tech talk into something that the end user understands, or whether that end user is the CEO of a, or senior management executive in enterprises, or it's you and me, just using our laptops. There's a translation that needs to be done between what does the tech do and what does it mean for you, and what are the resulting benefits. None of that in that, you think, and like you, I tried to go back and define what they were delivering. And there was this
Yeah.
sort of, mention about platforms, and
Yeah. And
and I
like,
blew it. Yeah, go
yeah,
on.
I was just going to say, so, maybe a couple more. So just to kind of, um, reiterate what I said. So vendors always get to a point with their hardware, and then they hand it over to the customer, to the end user, to the consumer, whoever it is, like a printer, or a notebook computer, or a server, or whatever the product is. And then it's down to the customer who's purchased it to do whatever they want to do with it. Wipe the operating system and put their corporate image on it, or drop it into I don't know, a mobile tank or something, or put it on a ship. Whatever they want to do with it, it's up to them. And I think the job of the vendor is just to make the setup and the configuration of that machine as quick as possible and as easy as possible. Now, if you can concentrate on those two things and come up maybe with some kind of very high level standard way of doing those things, and making that a familiar experience, if not interface. I mean, I don't know how you're going to do that on a HP printer with a LCD, that big. I don't know. But the point being is, I think that's where you need to get to, and then just hand it over, and then make the hardware as compatible as possible, so there's no impact on what the customer might install on top, and then you've got a runtime issue, or the antivirus picks up something, or there's a device driver that doesn't fit well with what the application, whatever the customer's trying to do with the hardware, and get rid of those incompatibilities. And I think I'd be just happy to receive the system at that point, and then I can do whatever I want to do with it as a customer.
But you're quite technical, and so in defense of them, I would say, what they need to do is understand how their end users want to use that technology. What do they want to use it for? And you get sort of bundles of these things where they're loading in, Microsoft Office, subscriptions, or they're bundling in anti-malware, and virus subscriptions into their offerings, and sort of wrapping it up so that you don't need to think too much about it. Now, an awful lot of that is bloatware, because it's, most people, would be quite happy dealing with, Google Sheets and Google's Word equivalent, because most end use customers, but it's getting them to think around delivering a whole package. A bit like AWS has made it really easy for enterprises to do what they need to do, and almost they need to take that sort of approach. And it was interesting, the HP, the guy they were talking to, had worked for Amazon. He'd worked for AWS, so it was like, okay, you ought to understand some of these things that are going on, but it was really hard to define. So I would take it further than you do in terms of, I would package it up for a consumer audience, with maybe some options that says, but like you have options on AWS, I just need, word processing and some collaboration tools and the ability to run, stream stuff and et cetera, et cetera. What's the best? Just set it up so it runs. It's almost, run. You can almost envision them saying, we'll throw in, subscriptions to Netflix or something for the year to get you started. All those sort of things are what I would think of that end users would understand. What he was talking about, you would understand, but most end users wouldn't. I'm thinking, well, hold on a minute, HP. If you really want to sell these at scale, it's those of us that are slightly techie, and you're more techie than me probably. Oh no, I just want the platform. Most end users don't, and most businesses want to. Again, so we'll come on to that in HP in a minute. But that's what got me. I agree with you. You summarized it at the start. I always thought, God, I've got nothing to say because you couldn't work out what the hell.
There's always something to say.
Yeah, there's always something to say.
There's always something to say.
Oh my goodness me! Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
You couldn't discern from what he was saying what software they were putting together.
Yeah. So this is, So how, there's. Like I said, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 layers in terms of how the hardware, especially something like a notebook computer, an end user device, maybe a tablet or phone. Not that HP Inc. is great at doing those. They're maybe good at selling notebooks or whatever, and maybe some desktops or something, but not necessarily kind of mobile devices. But anyway, point being is that type of device, I think as I said, maybe 2 or 3 layers steps before you really hand it over to the end users. Like I said, there's that kind of core software, device drivers, some utilities, about security or something else that are kind of related to the hardware. So you need that in order for the machine to run properly. So that's fine. And then there's the bloatware from the vendor. And then there's the bundled stuff from the third parties that are partners to that vendor. So the antivirus, the note-taking, blah, blah, kind of, software and so on that are completely, in most cases, useless. So unless you're an end and you're a consumer, the corporates don't really care about that. The corporates have their own license for Office or 365, whatever it's called these days, to their own software image that they want to, or application images they want to put on and so on. And now when you turn it over to that side, so we talked about the consumer, but then every corporate has their own image. They all have their own differences. This was the same issue that I actually had attending a recent Google Chrome OS event at Wembley Stadium. So it was a nice setup. We had a good lunch and dinner. And then we watched the football match, and then there was a presentation and so on from Google Chrome OS. And the basic misunderstanding that they seem to have, they showed a whole bunch of tools, and they said, and these tools will make the Windows admin, it makes their lives easier to manage both a fleet of Chrome OS machines, Google Chrome OS machines, as well as the traditional Microsoft Windows machines, right? So we have a whole bunch of tools for that Windows admin guy, for that person, to be able to manage our Chrome OS machines just as easily as the Microsoft Windows machines. And they showed things like security, revoking access, resets, re-imaging, all that, applying updates, patches, apps, whatever. Yeah, all looked great. But then I said to them, does this management software integrate with group policy, Windows group policy? And half of them didn't even know what group policy was, and then the other half kind of or not really sure, they didn't really know the answer. But if you ask any Windows admin in one of these corporates that manages hundreds, if not thousands of Windows, fleets of Windows machines, Windows 10 and Windows 11, they'll all say to you, all the changes that we make are through Windows group policy, because that is how you can apply a configuration change to Windows en masse, right? So something like, preventing teams from dragging and dropping a confidential file to a third party external to the company person that you're talking to. Sorry, drag and drops uploads are not allowed to this person because their email address is external. Group policy, right? You're only allowed, I don't know, 3 password guesses, not a million password guesses on your Windows password. Group policy, and so on and so on. So all the changes that I made through that type of approach. And I assume there's still group policies. This might have changed a little bit, but the point is that there was no integration from Google on all these wonderful tools that they had for Chrome OS notebooks that they were showing off, and they were very impressive machines. I mean, extremely light and looked really nice and very slick and and fantastic. But that would be the first question I would ask as a Windows admin. So the same thing here applies to HP Inc. What is it that you're putting in here? Because Deloitte, halfway through or later on in the conversation, took it to how you're making changes to the skills in your organization. Because they talked about what was the word that they used? I picked up on something. I'm just looking at my notes here. They picked up on something that was to do with the organization, with HP Inc. organization, and they kind of drifted away from the actual solution itself. So, it was kind of, how are you going to make the transition of your organization to this, software-driven type of, the software-driven kind of future that you're looking to do, and completely forgot about diving a little bit deeper into the actual what is the solutions, because you're talking about, I mean, like I said, I picked up from his response, his replies, when he said onboarding capability, configuration from the start, and these are all quotes and kind of or thereabouts, making their lives easier, i.e. customers' lives easier or whatever. So that's all admirable, but what does that mean? Because I don't have really anything on that. And then when they asked him about the organizational kind of update or change, he talked about having conviction, to presumably bulldoze through those changes that you're going to make to the organization.
Yeah, he covered it really badly, because you're basically asking a product-oriented company to stand on its head and start thinking from the end customer's perspective, which product companies don't generally do. They develop stuff and then try and work out how to apply that to the to potential customers. It used to drive me nuts in my career, trying to get people to think, what is it? What's the experience? Now we talk about end user experience, but what was it that people need to do their jobs? Just think of it that way, and you might come up with something completely different, and you'd certainly come up with different bundles of stuff. If you still need the core product, one of the things I know we'll get onto in future CSOPs, I think, is software versus hardware. What's the role of each? And how what's important now. But it is literally getting companies like HP to make a really big cultural shift and move away from. We used to ask the question. In a previous life of mine, when product managers came up with something, is I don't want to know what you've developed. I want to know why you developed it.
Yeah, why? Yeah, and what's the benefit? Yeah,
and what's the benefit? Yeah, you just leave it the why, and you used to talk about making their eyes spin.
Yes, indeed,
and didn't get anywhere.
So and I think that's kind of really like I said, that first layer of of tools and drivers and device drivers and whatever else you need to provide to make your hardware work and make it, like I said, work compatibly as much as to be as compatible as possible with what the customer is trying to do. But like I said, most corporates tend to re-image whatever you provided as a standard Windows image, anyway, whatever's on the hard drive or SSD, whatever it is, they tend to trash it anyway because they have a corporate image that they dump all the way from the OS upwards, on all their, typically on notebook machines. So I'd rather they focused on, if you really insist on providing that kind of bloatware, then try and make that bloatware kind of useful. Include a catastrophic failure recovery capability. Make your sort of recovery partition tools, easier, so we can get over things like CloudStrike, for example, and so on, and make that so idiot-proof that guy in the airport or at the railway station who doesn't know, only presses keys on a keyboard, with a bit of instructions from HQ, can press a couple of buttons and restore the image, and they're up and running in a couple of hours, after the catastrophic failure or something like CloudStrike. I'd rather really something like that helps customers kind of overcome problems and not necessarily enhance what they're doing. I don't need another note-taking pad with post-it, yellow post-it note apps as a piece of bloatware or third-party bundle.
I think you've hit on something absolutely fundamental there as well. Particularly in the world we live in today, and those sort of scenarios, you need something that's pretty foolproof, automated, to get people back up and running.
Exactly. Okay, so just quickly turning on to the other side of HP Corporation, which is HP Enterprise, or HPE. So this is based on I think the website's called Channel Futures article, which is about HPE making major updates to their private cloud portfolio. Now, I don't know what those major updates were, because the focus kind of boiled down to VM Essentials, which was something that they were trying to take advantage of the whole Broadcom fiasco from last year, which they're offering. But they also mentioned something called Morpheus Data, which is a company they apparently acquired last year. Yeah. And Morpheus Data struck me as one of those companies that seems to kind of focus on that, not kind of necessarily a super cloud capability, but certainly in that sort of region where they allow you to deploy whatever you want, wherever you want it to go. That was kind of the approach.
Yeah, it feels not dissimilar to the Emma Cloud people. I think you and I maybe touched on Emma Cloud previously, and it's that same sort of.
And Stack Guardian is the other one.
Yeah,
in that space.
And I mean, there's a certain logic to that. If you have this multifaceted environment with, as you say, traditional VMs, hyperconverged on premises, and you want to have a sort of similar look and feel to what you do in the public cloud, but you're coming from the opposite direction. Then AWS will come, who will drive their consolidated sort of similar approach to everything, right from the public cloud down into on-premises environments. This is something similar coming the other way, and probably not as powerful, I have to say. I don't know. We haven't seen sort of the details. The problem for HP was that Morpheus actually claims, and I don't know how good it was at being able to sort of manage your public cloud environment. Haven't looked at it, so I don't know. As well as the hyperconverged, or the on-premises environment. But HPE themselves are really focused, and probably rightly, on private cloud. I mean, you and I have a very strong opinion on what a hybrid cloud is. And we won't go back into that now, but and the thing that I found, I mean, it was all right. There was some marketing, I think, that and words and things that probably annoy you and me for different reasons. But they broke ranks once. They talked about they were pretty good at keeping on message around the fact that this was all to do about private cloud. But they broke ranks on one occasion when a guy called Rajiv Bardavage, and I probably murdered mangled his way you pronounce
Name.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's VP and Chief Product Officer for Private Cloud and Flex Solutions. And he was talking about the storage solutions that were going on. And he started talking about hybrid cloud. And I can imagine the HPE PR and marketing people going, no, don't do that. But he's done it to a journal, so it gets out. But also, and it's the same with the HP Inc. They started talking, certainly from their storage perspectives, about how they've reduced the footprint, increased density, performance, all those sort of issues.
Yeah.
Save costs, all those. Great. It was the footprint one got me because it was sort of classic. Yes, you've reduced the footprint. So what?
Yeah.
If you're running a dirty great big enterprise data center and you've reduced your storage, unless it stops you having to build another data center, what's the benefit to the business? And again, it's just, it's a personal gripe of mine that they mix features and benefits at will.
Yeah, you're not that standardized for that type of enhancement to be crucial to any company at all.
No,
your kit is not like worldwide standard, so that everybody builds their data center around your sizes. And now you've just said you've reduced the size of your footprint in a data center, and then the whole world rejoices because you've saved them a couple of inches on in their data center or something. It's not that important.
it's not that, and quite a lot of what they were talking about did fall into that sort of category. And I have to mention, and I'd love to know what you think about what it means, because I had no idea what this meant. They were talking about disaggregated hyperconverged infrastructure. And you think, disaggregated means you're breaking everything apart into its component pieces.
Yeah, it is. So I think what's happened recently, I think, is because the likes of Nutanix, who's kind of the king of hyperconverged infrastructure, if you like, and credit to them, I think, on at least achieving that. I wouldn't give them any more credit beyond that point. But what's happened, I think, or what you normally get, and hopefully this is right, viewers can actually tell me if our audience can tell me if I'm wrong. But what you normally get is when you buy the kit, buy the hardware, you can buy, you buy the kind of the compute, storage, and network, whatever the components are, and then you can just upgrade that, and you can just get more nodes, and you add those to your ACI cluster and so on. I think you can also do storage separately, but what you weren't able to do before was just have like compute nodes and not any storage, for example. So I think that's kind of the disaggregation, that three component thing that you needed in every single node is no longer required. You can now just have storage, and you can now just have compute, and so on, within your ACI.
So therefore, I go back to my original thing. The two words don't go together. Hyperconverged and disaggregated don't go together.
Exactly. It's a contradiction in terms.
So, and again, you sort of, this is a product company trying to think how it describes some new feature.
I'd rather they just throw, multi-cloud and AI in front of HCI. I think I'd probably believe that more as a marketing gimmick than a DHCI. So that's the kind of next generation virtualization. So so this was around that, right, Paul? It was kind of the article that we picked up on was kind of around these changes that HPE is trying to make. And but again, clearly, you and I know very well that Green Lake is their thing, right? Green Lake, and it was called Green Lake, presumably because sustainability and all that kind of stuff was the thing back in those days when they called it Green Lake. Nowadays, because of Gen AI and trying to we can't build data centers fast enough. Nobody cares about green and sustainability anymore.
The whole point, I think, from my perspective, was that yes, they're trying to do something for existing customers to make their difficult management environment easier to manage, their IT environment easier to manage. Great. But then they get into this sort of terminologies that just, they're trying to differentiate themselves, but they're not thinking what are the important things that we need to talk about. They're just giving it a label and saying, hey, we're now disaggregated hyperconverged infrastructure. Somebody's probably said, oh, well, everybody's spent a lot of money on HCI. You can't tell them they don't need HCI anymore. So you're going to have, it's ridiculous. This is where, I know marketing sometimes winds you up. I'm a marketeer, and it winds me up at times when they do these sort of things, because it gives marketing a bad name. But it's the classic, they're a product company desperately trying to think how they portray their next feature as a benefit.
And I think this
really
is
hard at times.
And this is the challenge, isn't it? So they brought in this Morpheus kind of software solution, and they're looking at it as a kind of unified, I think the highlights said a unified private cloud portfolio with HPE Morpheus. And that's fine. You kind of, trying to address all the systems using the same kind of interface or tool. The problem is twofold there. First of all, customers, actually maybe threefold, but the important point is that customers already have tools to provision stuff. So they already have tools to build, right? So I don't know where Morpheus is going to integrate into that. Do we API into Morpheus, or does Morpheus API into my tool, or where does it fit into my software and system management tools that I have in the data center? And really, this is kind of data center stuff. It's not really necessarily related to cloud. I don't even know if Morpheus can do anything like Terraform or something in a public cloud environment. I suspect it can maybe talk to Terraform. I have no idea, but it will probably do it in a data center sort of environment. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, remember, this is the same kind of layer of software as the bloatware we were talking about in HPE Inc. So again, HPE has to be very careful as to how it kind of introduces Morpheus, or how it uses Morpheus, or how it paints the picture of Morpheus. Now, I can tell you from experience, and having done this at IBM many years ago with things like Tivoli Provisioning Manager, and that's basically, by the way, the third point is that Morpheus sounds just like a glorified TPM, Tivoli Provisioning Manager. It's a management tool, kind of provision all your software for you, updates, biases, everything, essentially down to to whichever platform you wanted. I think the danger here is that none of the corporates like to pay for this type of software. They don't like to pay, so they're buying hardware from you, IBM, Dell, GreenLake from HPE, whatever. They don't want to license any of that extra software that you can that you bring in as well. They don't want the extra CDs or whatever they do them, they make them available as these days. They don't want that. They didn't want to pay for the systems management tools we had. They didn't want to pay for Tivoli Provisioning Manager. And I think if you paint Morpheus in that same way, it's not like a SaaS solution or something. Customers will not want to pay for it. They just don't like to pay because they just paid you for the hardware, and they expect all the other software that comes on top, device drivers upwards, is all free. It's all bundled with the hardware.
Well, I think
so if HP is looking to sell Morpheus, and maybe I'm sure it was a sold product before when it was a standalone company as Morpheus Data. But if HP is looking to do it in the same model, I think customers are going to resist, or they're just going to say, look, I already have Terraform. I already use Ansible and Terraform, or whatever tools to provision all my stuff, and that's how I build my systems. Or I use Microsoft's tools to do it, or something to build my server hardware. So I would tread carefully on that particular point.
It's a difficult one, because and particularly I saw this in the sort of what I call the IT infrastructure monitoring, and or it's sort of moved into observability space. Is
Yeah.
that
Or that too.
e-
Yeah. I mean, do they think that customers don't have that already?
well, exactly. The problem was with all the new, complete systems that were
Yeah.
being, whether it's from BMC or whoever,
Right.
they were struggling to get their whole systems in because each IT operations team had their own tools.
Yeah.
And trying to get them to stop using their own tools. And it wasn't important enough for senior leaders to say, hey, I'm going to sit on my IT operations team and tell them to stop using those tools. Now, but the real challenge was that, when you were looking at these, clearly there were areas where the integrated system, the bigger one, doesn't do as good a job as an individual tool in certain scenarios.
Yes.
That's always been
always the case. Yeah.
Always the case. And until and unless you can get a sort of, complete solution that really does better everything else, and this is where you come back to, value proposition development, product marketing, product development, all those sort of things. Everybody cuts corners and says, "Oh no, I need to get it out on the market now without the features in." And of course, any IT operations person, worth his salt is going to look at something and go, doesn't do that as well. I really need that piece. And in the end, it's how you get that so many times, they don't want to buy it. You're right. They don't want to buy. That's why they don't want to buy the software that you're.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for the likes of it. But they're product oriented. Therefore, they don't spend enough time understanding their target market. And if it's the target market is IT operations, my God, you need to go and live it for a while and see what tools are being used and why they're used and why they're important.
Indeed.
Then you can come back and do it. They
Indeed.
don't do that.
And I mean, like I said, I don't know what's bundled in the VM essentials, but if that kind of, helps customers to migrate or to be efficient in their VMware environment, running on top of GreenLake and whatever, that's fine. I've got nothing against that. But this other stuff is, with Morpheus and so on, and I'm sure again, Morpheus might well be a very capable platform or tool or whatever you want to call it, but it has all this stuff, all the problems that you and I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Plus the actual highlights from it is just very, it's very wishy-washy. There's a lot of, HP aims to, HP will, or intends to introduce and stuff like that, which just doesn't sound.
Well, they only bought it last year, and you'll know better than most the difficulty of integrating something from outside your business into a new business. I mean, at Unisys, we did it in massive scale by trying to integrate Burroughs and Sperry's lines. I mean, it took decades.
Yeah.
Decades.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the same scale, but it's just that, I've got to get something to market quickly. Well, it's no point doing it if you haven't been and found out what's going to make the customer buy.
Yeah, and this strikes me just really bringing Morpheus in to give you this kind of portfolio, unified portfolio approach.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it says advancements in, as you said, disaggregate, fiber converge, build. I mean, what is that? What is the enhancement there? What is the advancement? Just newer versions of, of their HCI platforms. Next generation virtualization options. The updates include new hypervisor options. Yeah, so I know that they've maybe kind of extended the options of hypervisor, but then so is everybody else.
Yeah.
Mirantis is on about, come to OpenStack now that if you're cheesed off with Broadcom and their new subscription model of VMware, all the Kubernetes guys, are saying, you don't need that. You just need KubeVirt, which is an extension module to Kubernetes, which allows you to run virtual machines next to containers. and you can do it all on Kubernetes with KubeVirt. So Red Hat is at it, and all the other players are at it as well. So I saw that on there they were offering OpenStack as another hypervisor, but like I said, so is Mirantis, and Mirantis has been doing it a lot longer than HPE. And let's not forget that HP, as the original corporation before the split, sold off its OpenStack platform, Helion, HPE or HP Helion as it was called at the time, to SUSE, and then SUSE struggled to actually digest that and incorporate that into their distribution of OpenStack. And then eventually they stopped selling OpenStack, which we will come to in the next topic. But anyway, so just giving another hypervisor does not mean that corporates are going to say, "Oh, thank you very much, HP. I think we'll move our 1,000 VMs, that are running in vSphere over to yours, which has it's a different format. The whole architecture has to be redone again. All the networking has to be redone. All the storage has to be repointed. And I mean, that's like a huge migration away from, from something as entrenched as VMware's vSphere, right?
Yeah, and obviously in an article like that and an announcement like that, you're not going to get all the detail you actually need. But the reality is, it's an announcement for existing HP users, effectively. It's not going to impact anybody who's not HPE in any way, shape, or form.
Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. So let's move on to our third topic. So we have OpenStack gets rescued by the Linux Foundation. Now, you guys may have heard recently or read recently that OpenStack, this was I think actually in March, the announcement was made. OpenStack is now part of the Linux Foundation. So that whole sort of Open Infra Foundation, as it's now called. Before it was called the OpenStack Foundation. So the Open Infrastructure or Open Infra Foundation is now has been adopted by the Linux Foundation. Now, I can tell you that between Open Infra and OpenStack and the CNCF, there's no love lost between those two. There has been some clashes around those two in the past, because they both offer, when it comes to cloud infrastructure, if you want to call it that, they offer some very similar, type of solutions, really. So OpenStack, obviously, being the, kind of the cloud operating system. There's been a number of those from the past as well. We've had a couple of other types of solutions that are kind of quite similar. We'll try and include maybe some details on those in the description of the video. But I just kind of wanted to focus on this because I think this is kind of really the final humiliation for OpenStack, because it was back in 2015, 2016, the project, which was originally developed by Rackspace and NASA, mainly by Rackspace to kind of please NASA in terms of what they wanted, which was like a cloud operating system. That was kind of at the height of 2016, 2017 was probably the height of the OpenStack. But then around that time, Kubernetes happened, and then the CNCF was formed, around that, and then obviously the CNCF landscape grew, and that really kind of not only dwarfed, but then really kind of diminished the use of OpenStack. So OpenStack sort of retreated into the telco space, where it's actually been quite strong in that space. But again, obviously that space is quite a limited space. Not everybody's a telco, and that's kind of really made it quite difficult to maintain the development of OpenStack. We've seen a lot of false dawns around that as well. So as I said earlier, SUSE dropped its distribution of OpenStack a number of years ago, shortly after trying to integrate their acquisition of HP Helion, which was HP's version of OpenStack. And then we've had more recently those who are have still remained in the OpenStack camp, so like some Red Hat, Mirantis, Canonical, who normally does Ubuntu, maybe some other ones as well, have all, what they've done is they've taken the OpenStack modules, the components, the software components that actually make up the OpenStack sort of platform. I won't bother trying to remember the names. I'll maybe drop those in the description of the video for you. What they've done is they've taken those modules and put them on top of Kubernetes to run as containers. So now you have, so if we pretend this is on bare metal, not in a public cloud or a hyper-converged environment, you just have a server, and then you drop a distribution of Kubernetes on top of it. So install it on the bare metal, let's say it's Red Hat's OpenShift. Now you can run OpenStack's modules as containers on top of OpenShift, which, as I said, is a Kubernetes distribution. And then you can create a logical cloud in that OpenStack layer, and then you can run your applications on top of that as virtual machines. And there's other intricate layers before you get to do that, but I'll just kind of maybe pause there. Is that making sense to you, Paul, at all?
Well, I always said you were going to lead on this one because to me it was, the whole debate around it appeared very arcane. So yeah, it made the thing that you've just talked about that makes absolute sense is this layering one on top of another to make it work.
Yeah.
And I suppose I came at the announcement from a fairly different perspective than I normally do, because I'm not particularly technical. I don't understand the intricacies of OpenStack versus CNCF and all those.
Yeah.
I've got a different CNCF story for another time. But the issue, is if all you're doing is doing more and more virtualized layers, this is a crazy way to go, surely.
Exactly.
Absolutely a crazy way to go. Yeah, and yes, from a performance point of view, from a supportability point of view, you're just creating more areas where you're going to run problems. So I looked at it and thought, what's the reasoning behind them getting together, other than getting together? Because normally when people do this, they've either got some functionality that they want to get hold of, and from the other party, and incorporate into what they do. Sometimes, rarely, but you do get ones where they just want to kill it, and I've seen that happen. Here, I was trying to work out what it was because there's no. I don't know the Linux Foundation well enough to say, is there a sort of drive in there that says, actually, it would be really good to get hold of these OpenStack capabilities to start to merge it. And therefore, you would go through a process that says, what do I need to take from what we've now got hold of? And maybe, maybe that's the wrong terminology, given that we're talking about open source and a much more, supposedly collaborative type environment. But it sort of struck me that says, I don't know why they've done it, because all they've done is created, a far wider product set, if I can call it that, with no plan as to how you might want to, merge the two into something sensible.
Exactly. I don't know, because OpenStack was touted as, like I said, as a cloud operating system. So, drop a whole bunch of servers down, put OpenStack on top of them, and they'll effectively act as a supercomputer, as a kind of a super virtualization in a hypervisor or whatever. And that concept has gone away, really. We've kind of moved away from that concept. And if you really want to do that today, you ought to do it with something rock solid like, as much as I'd hate to admit it, Red Hat's OpenShift or any Kubernetes distribution. So you do it as a containerization thing. And as one of my customers is doing exactly right now as we speak, they're using KubeVirt to bring in their old VMware vSphere virtual machines to run them in KubeVirt, right? And they run them side by side on their chosen Kubernetes distribution, which will remain nameless, next to their containers, next to their containerized applications. So that's what they're doing, for example, to move forward, right? But you don't go and, like HPE's we just talked about doing, by introducing OpenStack as another hypervisor. Nobody wants that. Yeah, as we just said, it's retreated into the telcos, and even the telcos, and this is where I think the spatters between CNCF and the Open Infra Foundation is that the telcos are looking to containerize all those services that OpenStack used to offer, which were specific to their market. So things like the network function virtualization and some of the more later or latest terminology and services around that. So all of those, because of the advent of Kubernetes, as we said, everybody's moved towards that. So we don't want to run, or certainly the telcos would like to leave the OpenStack space, I think, and run in a containerized environment. And even the public cloud providers have made them available in that way as well. So AWS announced, I don't know how long it was ago now, some time ago now, they're now offering those telco services, those capabilities in AWS public cloud to run as containers. So you can come into the AWS cloud and run your telco cloud essentially, using those containers.
And I'm sure, the people that run telcos, are not daft. They've been looking at the
Exactly.
integration and saying, actually, there's probably no forward path for OpenStack. And if we're going to compete with AWS, if we're not going to have AWS completely eat our lunch, we need to be doing something very different that we can move forward with at pace.
Yeah.
And that wasn't OpenStack,
Yeah.
and therefore, it's. I did say when it happened, it was, I didn't want to say give it a decent burial, but it was sort of it's a bit what it felt like.
Yeah. So the OpenStack, or the Open Infra Foundation, also has some side or other separate projects apart from the core project. So Kata Containers, which is kind of building more secure based containers, Airship, which is a SDLC or software development lifecycle kind of management tool, Zool, which is a CI/CD platform, Starling X, which is an edge computing platforms. So there's a whole bunch of those. Okay, so maybe the LXF kind of wants to have those and maybe move those over to the CNCF at some point. But again, it's not like the CNCF landscape is short of those types of things. I'm trying to figure out some of the overlap that's actually available, or that's visible right now in the CNCF landscape, because a lot of their projects are doing some things that are extremely similar to each other, especially in that we can address any cloud environment from public to private for you to build your cloud infrastructure. So the likes of OpenTofu and Crossplane and a number of others are very, very similar in terms of some of the things that they're actually doing.
So the danger is that the Linux Foundation is that they're going to get caught in some tremendous crossfire and some holy wars, I think is probably the only way to describe it. Between
That is a perfect way to describe it.
It's without any sort of structure that says how, what's the way in which we're going to streamline the offerings. It will be a bun fight between the various supporters of the two sides, and you think, interesting move, guys.
Yeah. So, we've seen, all I've seen really from the OpenStack sort of camp since the time when Kubernetes was and remember, I have been a very close experience with all of this, having experienced it at both SUSE and then at Mirantis as well. So I kind of lived it and breathed it through those vendors when I worked for them. I've just seen really OpenStack retreat. There's been more retreats every single time, and I thought this, now you can run your OpenStack services on top of Kubernetes and containers on top of Kubernetes was kind of the final straw. But actually, LXF managed to surprise me by, the Linux Foundation managed to surprise me by this recent announcement from March, by actually adopting the Open Infra Foundation, which administers OpenStack, or bringing it into the fold as well. So there's a distinction between LXF projects and CNCF projects, but nevertheless, both are under the same umbrella.
If you could ever get, the senior leadership in, maybe somebody from Linux Foundation or whoever, or maybe have a sort of three-way debate, but with senior level people, to get an understanding of why they did this. That's the thing. Why did you do it?
Yeah, the why is still, I think,
because
I'm still stuck on the why. I have to say.
Because we can't work out how they're going to manage it if they haven't got a clear reason why they did it.
Yeah, exactly. And then what is the impact of that? And I mean, if it's just funding, and then kind of the Open Infra Foundation was kind of crying to the Linux Foundation, I wouldn't be surprised, because, like I said, OpenStack at its height used to have 2 conferences a year. Now, who has 2 conferences a year? The CNCF, right? So those 2 conferences, got killed off many years ago. They became local events, and I don't even know if those local events are still running for OpenStack these days. So, like I said, the vendors have all shifted gears. Some of them have dropped out, like the likes of SUSE. The others have all converted the way that you run OpenStack services. That, to me, just kind of gets it into long-term support mode. That's what I got the impression of when you're saying, the likes of Red Hat and Canonical and Mirantis say, oh, now you can run your OpenStack services on top of our Kubernetes distributions. That, to me, sounds like you're going into long-term support. So the product's being deprecated. You're not going to sell it. You're not going to act proactively, be marketing it. But for those customers who we still have, you can that will be your next version, and that also quite nicely segues that customer into our existing product, our Kubernetes solution as well. So but so all of that is kind of where I'm seeing it. If you guys want to hear a lot more about OpenStack, I did a talk with Leo Stellick, my friend Leo Stellick, called "Is OpenStack Dead?" So have a look at that. I'll again include the link to that video in the description. So by all means, have a look at that. We go into a lot more detail about OpenStack, and Leo kind of explains about his experience with it as well. But just going back to what you said, and you hit on a very important point about the layers of management and the upkeep and the maintenance that you have to do. So as we said, if we put, let's say, Red Hat OpenShift on top of bare metal, keep it nice and simple, and then we run the OpenStack services on top of that OpenShift, which, as we said, is a Kubernetes distribution or can have Kubernetes capabilities, then OpenStack creates as we said, that kind of logical cloud environment. But that cloud environment doesn't have anything in it. In order to run your applications, you need to run a virtualization platform or a container platform on top of it. In most cases, it'll be a virtualization platform. So then you have to run something like KVM on top of that, which is an open source hypervisor. And then you run your applications. You create your VMs within KVM, and then you run your application on top of that. And I think that's the crazy complexity that you will have to do, even if you cut down on that by eliminating KVM somehow. And maybe there are some modules, and like I said, I've not kept up to date with all the OpenStack sort of not the non-core services of OpenStack. Even if that's possible, why on earth would you want to introduce that extra layer of maintenance and upgrades and security and so on? It just doesn't make any sense.
And it only takes one developer or one operations guy to decide, actually, I need a new interface between these, or I need to link them together slightly more tightly to the point where it's unsupportable in the future, because you've now effectively, if you're API driven and you've got very firm, sort of separation between the two environments.
Yeah.
We've seen in the past where, in order to make something perform, you sort of tweak something through that, so that it becomes so complex and so complicated. Not so much complex; it's that they're all is that you can't support it. You can't upgrade it. You can't do anything to it.
Exactly.
So it just seems strange.
Very, 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 very strange. I mean, I guess we've kind of had a guess at some of the reasons why, but I still want to know the official kind of what was the decision-making process, Bill. Was it just simply money? Because the Open Infra Foundation has just run out of money and they just can't maintain it anymore.
You're going to have to go to one of these conferences where the senior folks are with a microphone in hand
and just stick it right in their face and ask for an interview.
Why the hell are you doing this?
Yes, exactly. I might actually do that next time, definitely, if I can find some folks. Okay, so Paul, we're there. 3 very interesting topics, I think, this month. We had lots to talk about, so that was quite good. Thank you ever so much again, Paul. Really appreciate all your insights, your comments, as always. Always good to kind of bounce off these ideas and things from you and get your perspective on it. All the links to Paul and all the stuff that we've talked about and then some will be in the description of the video as soon as I can upload it on there. Bear in mind, YouTube actually limits that number of characters in that description, so I do struggle sometimes to upload this stuff, and sometimes you might see extra notes from me as a pinned comment on the video, so do look out for that on there as well. I'll try and upload that as soon as I can. Really appreciate you guys watching. We really do kind of value your input, so if you do have any comments on the topics we've discussed, please drop them in the video sort of comment section. And yeah, we really appreciate you also to subscribe to the channel. So if you like this content, some of the other content on the Cloud Therapist channel, that would be really useful, and really appreciate you guys in supporting me by subscribing to the channel. Most of you, apparently, according to the YouTube statistics, are not subscribers at the moment. So yeah, that would really help me out if you can actually just hit that subscribe button for me. Thanks all for watching, and we'll see you next time.